I'm a living, breathing person, human being. For example, McDonald's. McDonald's can't force me to eat their Big Macs. They need my consent. I would like to state for the record that I am not a corporation. I don't choose the contract with the state of Michigan. I don't choose to do business with them in this regard with another business. It seems like a coercion of some sort.
If you wouldn't mind putting your name on the record, please.
I'm the executor and sole beneficiary of the trust and estate of Mr. Kevin Dwayne Craft, the legal persona. I am not here making a general appearance. I'm here by special divine appearance, judge, to settle a matter, to call for a constitutional court of record to ask for a summary judgment upon the truth and facts that I placed upon the record with my documents. I stand firmly on my rights, and I'm here to ask for that summary judgment, please.
You've asked for.
I do also have a few questions.
I understand you're pro se, and then therefore you get a little bit of leeway, but typically the judges don't answer questions. We're the ones who ask questions. This isn't like a trial court where it's a very kind of back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The Court of Appeals is more structured in terms of the lawyers or parties come up, they make their arguments. The judges may or may not have questions for the person, and then it's submitted, and then we go back and discuss the matter, and then at some point in the future we come out with an opinion. So it is different in that respect than trial court.
Understood. But I am wondering if this is a court of constitution, and would the Constitution be applied in these proceedings?
The Court of Appeals, the Michigan Court of Appeals, is provided for under the state Constitution of 1963.
Is that a yes?
That's the answer I'm giving you.
Okay. I'm asking to verify to make sure these proceedings are legitimate. The Constitution has two jurisdictions: common law, admiralty law, or maritime tribunal. And I'm asking in which context would this court try to enforce jurisdiction on me?
We're acting under the state Constitution of Michigan of 1963.
Moving forward, I'm here to pretty much address the court's error for ignoring my motions. Notice of dismissal, default judgment under Federal Rule 55 was filed December 12, 2022. Under Federal Rule 55, if a party fails to respond to the defendants themselves, and this is confirmed by my affidavits and other means, the clerk must officially record a default judgment of that party. I filed several motions and they were ignored. That's why I'm here. In Haynes versus Kirnar, 404 U.S. 519, 1972, courts must be understanding and not easily reject motions from people just representing themselves. And that's what took place in this matter. In Article 1, Section 17 of the Michigan Constitution prevents courts from ignoring motions and guarantees that people have a fair chance to represent themselves in any argument and evidence. That did not happen. That's why we're here. The state ordered me to take a paternity test. And Monell versus Department of Social Services, which is a New York State case. The Supreme Court case established that municipalities' liability under the Section 1983 for constitutional violations in the context of child support cases, where the appellant argues that a warrant should be required for me obtaining genetic and biological material. I think it's very sensitive when a state injects an order asking me to give genetic and biological material without a warrant.
Under the blazing fluorescent lights of a Grand Rapids courtroom, the tension was thick enough to slice through. As the man in the blue checkered shirt shuffled his papers, his chest puffed with misplaced confidence, ready to lecture the judge on what he proudly declared as sovereign law, completely unaware that the walls of justice he stood within had heard this same tired speech 100 times before, each ending the same way. With the law triumphing over delusion, he began his performance with booming conviction, insisting he was not the legal entity named in the documents, that he was a living man, separate from the corporate fiction, bound by government contracts, his words spiraling in a dizzying monologue about natural rights, maritime law, and the birth certificate conspiracy, while the judge, calm and unimpressed, leaned back with that seasoned patience born from years of hearing nonsense dressed up as intellect, the courtroom gallery holding their breath as they watched a man try to debate his way out of paying for his own children. His voice rose, hands slicing the air as if his passion could outweigh the facts, spouting about how the court had no jurisdiction over a free man, that he stood as a sovereign entity, ungoverned and unbound, quoting half-remembered snippets from internet forums and pseudo-legal manifestos, his arguments colliding with each other like waves in a storm, but none of them finding solid ground, because reality, especially legal reality, has no patience for fantasy. Every sentence he uttered seemed to dig him deeper. And yet he didn't see it, his mind trapped in a maze of his own making, believing that if he just said the magic words, the walls of the system would crumble around him, that his obligations would evaporate into thin air. The judge finally interrupted, not with anger, but with the measured tone of someone who had seen this all before, reminding him that he was, in fact, in a court of law, under legal jurisdiction, and that his duty to his children was not a negotiable matter. But instead of listening, the man doubled down, his pride flaring, accusing the court of corruption, accusing the state of overreach, waving his hands in defiance, his voice echoing off the oak-paneled walls as the bailiff shifted uneasily, ready in case the situation escalated, while the judge simply let the storm burn itself out, giving the man enough rope to hang his own argument. And hang it he did, sentence by sentence, his logic collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions, his bluster transforming from confidence to confusion as he stumbled over his own definitions, trying to explain why he was not subject to laws he simultaneously quoted in his defense. It was a performance of misplaced rebellion, a tragicomic theater where the protagonist didn't realize he was the villain of his own story. The father who refused to support his children yet demanded to be seen as righteous, who hid behind pseudo-legal jargon to justify neglect. The judge finally raised a hand, calm but firm, cutting through the rambling speech like a scalpel through noise, declaring that the court's jurisdiction was established, that the man's claims were baseless, and that the law, real law, not the internet fantasy, would be upheld. A hush fell over the courtroom as the gavel struck, the echo carrying the weight of finality, but even then, the man tried one last desperate plea, his voice trembling not with authority but with the fear of defeat, insisting he did not consent to the proceedings, as if consent were what made justice binding. The judge, unmoved, reminded him that the law does not depend on one's belief to function. It simply is, and that his children's right to support outweighed his philosophical detachment from reality. What followed was a masterclass in composure, as the judge calmly dismantled every nonsensical claim, explaining point by point why the so-called sovereign citizen ideology had no legal basis, citing cases, precedent, and the fundamental principles of law, while the man stood there, the bluster draining from his shoulders, realizing that for all his bravado, he had walked into a battlefield without a weapon. Yet even in defeat, he clung to his delusion, muttering about the illegitimacy of the system, oblivious to the irony that the same system he mocked was the only one granting him a platform to speak. The audience shifted, a mix of pity and disbelief, watching the inevitable conclusion unfold, as the judge ruled decisively, ordering that child support payments resume immediately, warning that failure to comply would result in contempt of court. The man opened his mouth again, but the words that came out were hollow now, the fire gone, replaced by the faint realization that his arguments had achieved nothing but embarrassment. The gavel fell one last time, sharp and final, sealing his defeat not with cruelty but with justice, a moment that would later echo across the internet as an example of the absurdity of pseudo-legal defiance, a lesson in humility broadcast to thousands. And as the man turned to leave, the courtroom doors closing behind him, the quiet murmur of justice continued on, indifferent to his self-proclaimed sovereignty, because the law does not bend to ego. It endures, steady and real, unmoved by fantasy. His story became a cautionary tale, a viral reminder that words without truth hold no power, that freedom is not found in denial but in responsibility, that a father's duty to his children cannot be out-argued with YouTube philosophy. Across the digital world, viewers watched, laughed, shook their heads, but beneath the amusement lay something deeper, A glimpse into how far some will go to avoid accountability. How belief without foundation can consume reason. In the end, the clip became more than just courtroom entertainment. It became a mirror reflecting a modern epidemic of misinformation, a culture where some mistake stubbornness for strength, where defiance replaces logic, where truth is twisted into ideology. Yet amid all the noise, the judge's calm voice stood out as a beacon of reason, proof that patience, knowledge, and adherence to real law will always dismantle fiction, no matter how loudly it's shouted. The camera caught the last frame of the man walking out, his shoulders heavy, his expression a storm of frustration and denial, and somewhere in that silent exit, the story of his sovereignty ended. Not with triumph, but with the unmistakable sound of reality closing in. The internet would remember him as the man who thought he could out-talk the system, but all he really did was teach the world a simple truth. That justice doesn't need your consent to exist. It only needs your compliance to work. And as the video spread, garnering thousands of views and comments, the world found itself both entertained and enlightened, reminded that no matter how convincing the fantasy, the law remains unmoved, standing tall in quiet dignity while the noise of defiance fades into silence, leaving only one truth. You can argue all you want, but you can't talk your way out of what's right.